I've got a spectacular game to show you here. 14-year-old Abhimanyu Mishra from the US playing against 54-year-old Vasyl Ivanchuk from Ukraine. A 40-year age gap between these two. But I tell you what, this is something else. So stick around. And at the end, I'm going to set you a question. How did... well, one of the players finished the game off. It's a tricky one, so stick around. There's a very nice puzzle to finish the game. I don't want to spoil the result, but let's have a look and see what happened. So, Mishra, what a talent. Of course, he became the youngest ever player to achieve the Grand Master title. He was 12 years and I can't remember how many months old, but he holds the record for the youngest to get the Grandmaster title. And he's making great strides recently. Got 50% at the very strong US Championship. But this is a tough one. He's facing the veteran genius, chess genius, Vasyl Ivanchuk. And of course this is from the FIDE Grand Swiss tournament taking place in the Isle of Man at the moment. So this is standard position. This is the Richter-Rauser variation of the Sicilian. Generally thought to be quite a solid way for black to play. Comparatively, it's an open Sicilian. Everything can happen. But often this is a slow burner. And here the normal move is to castle queenside, tuck your king away, and then perhaps to advance with f4 or f3 and g4. But black has counterplay, and black is developing pretty solidly. But here Mishra plays a move which is rather unusual. I mean, thousands and thousands of games have been played with castles queenside here. But Mishra played the anti-positional knight takes c6. This is unusual. So why do I say this is anti-positional? Because it brings a pawn into the centre, and that could be useful if black wants to break open and establish a centre with d5. It also opens up the b file. And if white's king is going this side of the board, then that could be problematic. So this is unusual. But he's clearly done his research very well, because this is still a very tricky position. Castles queenside. There we are. Line up on the d file, and that is very important, we're going to see. And Ivanchuk plays d5. Well, it's the principal move. You break in the centre. You establish this strong central point. There is a slight drawback. The king is in the middle of the board. But, well, it's a solid pawn front, so it seems okay at the moment. Now, white cannot win a piece here. e5, this pin doesn't win a piece. Why not? Because black can break the pin with h6 and then g5, and the game goes on. So after d5, what did Mishra do? He played queen e3. Okay, this looks like a nice move because it puts the queen on the same line as the king and opens up the rook towards the queen. So, you know, there are awkward pins on both e and d files here. So bishop e2 looks sensible, breaking that pin and also protecting the king to some extent. Now, if black can castle quickly here, you know, given one more move, then I think he'll have a nice position because, you know, that is a really solid pawn front in the middle of the board. It's hard to break that down. So Mishra reacts quickly, and I'm sure this is preparation. And I mean, there have been a few games played like this in the past. Bishop takes knight, and normally I would say don't give up your bishop for the knight. You've got to love your bishops. But there's a problem for black, because if you play bishop takes bishop, that's the move we'd really like to play. Then pawn takes pawn, and you can see that with this pin, that's the reason the queen went to e3. The pawn can't take the knight, so white has just won a pawn. That's the problem. So after bishop takes knight, black has to play pawn takes bishop. That's obviously a compromise, because with the open g-file, it makes it problematic for the king to castle on the king side. So already, that's tricky for black. Where does the king go? Still a very nice centre, but at some point that king could be in trouble. So it has to decide, do you prepare kingside castling? Do you move the queen and bishop and go queenside, or do you try to keep the king in the middle? And the next move from Mishra, bishop c4, really raises the stakes. The bishop just adds more pressure to that central pawn on d5. Now, it's well protected by these pawns. So it could be that white is intending some kind of sacrifice here. It could be also the bishop just sits back on b3 and protects the b-file, covers the king, and just stops those central pawns advancing. So anyway, it clears the ranks as well. Bishop b7, so that lends some support to this pawn, because already white was thinking about a sacrifice. And rook e1. I mean, this is a lovely lineup of white's pieces, but it's going to be hard to batter through those central pawns. At least you're going to have to compromise or sacrifice in some way if you're going to get through. But it's just a nice lineup, and you can see that with the queen and rook on the e-file, then this pin could be nasty. Already this is quite tricky. So, for example, if the king were to castle, I mean, this doesn't look good for just because the king looks too exposed, but here straight away, white can exploit the pin like this, and knight takes here, and you win that bishop on e7, so white is a pawn up, and well, look at black's pawns. So that's why this rook came to the e-file. It sets up some nasty pins here. So how does black deal with this? What do you do with the king? Well, this move is also potentially an issue. So Ivanchuk played h5, preventing that queen coming to h6. But with the pawn on h5, it makes it unlikely that the king is going to castle now. So that in some ways that restricts black's options. And it is possible just to play quite slowly here with white. You could just put the king on b1, for example, and just ask black, okay, what are you doing now? But Mishra was in a hurry. He took on d5. C takes, and he sacrificed a piece on d5. Pawn takes and knight takes, so there's a threat here on e7, so that knight has to be eliminated. Bishop takes, rook takes, attacks the queen, so white gains time, and queen c7. Right, well, we can take stock. White has sacrificed a piece. This is an extra bishop, but white has two pawns for the piece, already not bad. And if you look at black's pawns, they're really ragged. And of course, there's a lovely pin here, so it's not possible to escape with the king very easily. In fact, this position rather reminds me of an old game, famous game, Fischer against Tal from the Candidates Tournament 1959, where Fischer also sacrificed a piece in an open Sicilian and had, well, two rooks and a queen bearing down on a king like this, and Tal had an extra dark square bishop. Tal survived. It's a brilliant game. And, well, more than survived, he actually won in the end. So it can turn easily if white's initiative just dissipates. So somehow, you've got to keep shaking black up here. Now, rook c5 played by Mishra, hitting the queen. And Ivanchuk just put the queen back. Mishra decided to repeat the position. Rook d5, queen c7. Queen has to keep guarding the bishop, of course. And rook c5 again. And again, the queen came back to d8. I'm not going to offer alternatives here. There were better defences, very hard to see. I mean, perhaps Ivanchuk thought the game was about to end in a draw. But here is where Mishra played, I think, well, a very subtle move. This is one of the star moves of the game. He was obviously unsure at this point the way to go. Must have been tempting to just take a draw against Ivanchuk, you know, an absolute legend. But Mishra found a great move here. Queen f3. That's brilliant. Okay, I've put lots of arrows on the board. The queen threatens the pawn on f6. Obviously, there's a pin on the e-file. That's one thing. Also, that rook perhaps threatens to take the pawn on h5. Could be useful to get round the back to attack the king. And also, the queen looks at that rook on a8. So sometimes it might be possible to play rook takes, and queen takes won't be possible because the rook hangs in the corner, and then king takes might be problematic. So there's also potentially a check on c6. So that queen f3, it's a really subtle move. Ivanchuk played king f8 and rook takes h5. As I said, there are lots of potential alternatives on each move, but I'm going to stick to the main line, the game, because it's really very special and very well played by Mishra. So another pawn's taken, so now it's 3 pawns for a piece. But if black stabilizes, then the bishop usually is a match for those 3 pawns. And now king g7. Now the queen can't attack on its own. It needs help. So that's why the rook swings up the board. And the threat is to check on g3. So that's why bishop d6 is played, covering the square here. And a check on g4. King f8. Rook h3. Be careful. There's a check threatened on h8. King e7. Guards. Queen e4. Check. So the king can't go back. Again, there's rook h8. So king d7. The king's staggering around in the middle, but it does have some protection. Queen b7 check. Now the bishop can't go back because of rook d3. The king came to e8. Right. Here is where I'd like you to have a think. You have a think, I'll have a drink. White to play. What would you do here? White to play. Cheers. Well, I hope you're careful here. If you play rook h7, you can lose. Check. And queen d1 mate. Not good. But how do you make progress? Rook h8 was played. Good move. Forcing bishop f8. And now here is the move that you had to foresee. Because this could still kind of fizzle out to nothing, or go into some endgame where in fact there isn't a win for white. However, this is a great move. Rook h7. Threatening queen takes pawn mate. So only one decent way to defend, bishop e7. And here is the subtle winning move. Queen c6 check. And here Ivanchuk resigned. Why did he resign? Well, if queen d7, then the rook hangs. And if king f8, you take the rook in the corner. And rook h8 wins the queen here with a completely winning endgame of rook against bishop. So that's why Ivanchuk resigned in this position. That's a really nice finish. So rook h7, just to repeat, immediately doesn't work because of bishop f4 check. So first of all you throw in the check. And only then rook h7. And after bishop e7, then there's that just little flick back. Queen c6, you have to play that. If you take straight away, then the rook can still block on f8, so you throw in that one, and then you take, and that wins the game. Brilliant stuff from Mishra, really sharply played at the end there. As I said, there were various moments where there were a couple of inaccuracies. This is human chess, this is normal. For the record, Ivanchuk, instead of queen d8, Ivanchuk should have played queen d6. And after rook c6, there's only one move, and that's to go back to d8. Now, how you divine this in an actual game, over the board game, it's terribly difficult. But basically, this will hold the draw according to my machine. Very tough to spot. And perhaps Mishra could have played a little better here. Apparently rook d5 is a slightly better move. I mean, who cares? Rook h5 puts enough pressure on. And here king e8 was the only way to hang on, but very, very promising for white indeed. But overall, a brilliant game by Abhimanyu Mishra, who clearly is a fantastic talent. As I said, he's only 14 years old, making great strides at the moment. Every tournament he plays, he seems to be getting better and better. He's now on 50%. It's a tough tournament. Yeah, he's on 50%. Yeah, 5 out of 10 going into the 11th and final round. By the way, in that encounter between Hikaru Nakamura and Fabiano Caruana, Nakamura won a brilliant game. I was kind of in two minds which game I should show, to be honest. Nakamura did extremely well, but you might well have seen that game elsewhere. So I wanted to show you that one. Going into the final round, it is so close. 3 players on 7.5, Nakamura, Vidit and Yesipenko. 3 players on 7, Erigaisi, Predka and Kaimer. Only 2 spots available for the candidates tournament. Any of those 6 could make it. It's going to be really tight. So watch out for the final round taking place on the Isle of Man. Thanks for watching.